Hi, today I'm going to show you how to make a text portrait. I'm going to demo this in Photopea, but of course you can do the same things in Photoshop. I just wanted to demo it in Photopea because Photopea is a great alternative to Photoshop, which is free and it's all web-based. And you can still save everything as a PSD file with layers and everything to then be opened again in Photoshop. So we're going to start with a text portrait. Now, everything I'm showing you, like I said, can be done in Photoshop as well. We're going to start with a new file. So we're going to go to File and New. When you do this in Photoshop, you'll get something very similar to this, but we're going to do a 5x7 photo today is what we're going to do. You can also alter your sizes to be custom here. And if you notice, whenever you work with the photo, you'll get a 300 DPI or PPI, which is fantastic because that's the proper print resolution. You can also name your project here. I'm going to name my project today Danny because I'm going to be doing an image of a dear student that I knew about a year ago. And today I'm working on this project and it's his birthday. So I think it's just appropriate that I work on that for him today. I'm also going to change my background from white. I'm going to change it to, oh, well, I guess let's just keep it at white. I thought I had the option to bring it to black, but we're going to just keep it at the white because eventually what we're going to do is going to switch that out to black. But we're going to go ahead and click on Create. Now, the next thing we want to do is bring in your picture. Now, the picture I'm bringing in is kind of low res. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but it's the only option I have right now for the project that I am doing. Also, it's not terrible because we're only going to use the pixels to inform the actual final graphic. It's not really going to be making up the final graphic. So it's okay slightly that it's not the best quality, but you'll get a better final result if your quality is really high res. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open. So I'm saying ideally you would want this to be really high res or the same resolution, but I'm going to kind of break the rules a little bit today because sometimes you might have to as well. And I want to show you how it's slightly okay for this particular project. So I went ahead and opened this file for Danny. I'm going to grab this layer and I'm going to bring it in to the other project. That's the same process that you would do for Photoshop. And you can see it's really low res compared to what we were. You also have the option of going to File and Open in Place, and you can do that as well. And if you did that, you'd have to make sure that you rasterize the image afterwards. Now, the one thing about this project is you want to make sure that you're focusing on the actual face itself. You'll get the best results from that. So not so much the shoulders or the background or anything like that, but you want to really focus on the face. So we're going to have to change the size. To change the size, you want to go to Edit and then Transform and then Scale. If you are working in Photopea, you have to make sure that you're holding down the Shift key. If you're using Photoshop and you're doing an older version, such as, oh gosh, anything before 2019 CC, you will also have to hold down the Shift key. And that's so you do not change the actual proportions of the scaling, meaning making it too wide or too narrow. So in the most current version of Photoshop, you just have to click on the corner bounding box and it will automatically restrain the proportions or constrain the proportions. So I have it about the size that I want. I'm going to go ahead and double click. You can also hit enter. And then just like in Photoshop, you also have that X or that check mark. You can also hit the check mark to say we're okay. So now we have our image. right? We have our image placed. The next thing we want to do is we want to make it into a black and white image. There's a couple different things you can do. You can always add an adjustment layer if you like. In Photopea, you have those adjustments down below in the layers panel. But I'm going to go up here and do it this way so that it's permanent versus just another adjustment layer. So I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and then I'm going to go to black and white. And what you'll notice is going to happen is it's going to alter the actual pixels versus creating another layer. So I want to go ahead and hit OK. So now we've made it black and white, and you can see in the layers now, I've just made that layer black and white versus having an adjustment layer that hovers over the layer it's adjusting. So I've made a permanent change. I also want to go to Image, Adjustments, and this time I want to go to Brightness and Contrast. And I want to kind of really up the contrast a bit. In the instructions, I talk about how when you are going to the blacks and whites, you can also up the reds to kind of alter that too. But for this picture, I kind of want to just work with the brightness and contrast a little bit. Because for preparing the actual image that the text is going to grab. So I want to make sure that the highlights stand out and the lowlights kind of recede back. So there we've got our image ready. Now the next part is pretty important, and this is going to be the text. So what I did is I found some text that I found appropriate for this project. I found a eulogy of Danny that was written by a dear friend of his. If you're not sure who this student is, I'm sorry, but it's a student that had passed away in 2018 now, and today is his birthday, and it just seemed like an appropriate project for me to do today, just in remembrance of him. You can find any kind of text that you want, maybe a poem that you like. It could be just a repetitive statement over and over again, anything that kind of speaks to you or you think represents the image that you are using. In this case, I'm finding a eulogy that was written about Danny by a dear friend, and I'm copying that. And I'm going back to Photopea, so I have that text copied. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab my type tool. So just like in Photoshop, what we would do is we're going to click, hold, and drag. And I want to fill up the entire image with this text because the text is actually going to be what's making up the image. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Control V and I'm going to paste in that eulogy or that text that I just captured. But the one thing is, in particular, is I want this text to fill in this image. So you can see there's a lot of spacing in there, and I want to really fill that up. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Control A. And that's going to highlight all of the text. And I'm going to kind of alter a couple things. So I'm going to go to my window. And just like in Photoshop, you also want to go ahead and open up this particular character panel. So in Photopea, it's under character. In Photoshop, you'll probably scroll down to the bottom and look under type and then character. But we want the character panel. The character panel allows me to manipulate the text a bit more. Another panel I want to open up is the paragraph panel. Now, the paragraph panel is how the text is actually laid out in a paragraph format. We want to make sure that we are doing justified text. Now, justified text will fill the text all into that specific space. But I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to do justified text, but to the left. And you'll notice everything is going to kind of shift a bit. The other thing I want to do is I'm going to go back to my characters, my character panel. I'm going to click on the tab for that. And when I do, I'm going to change a couple things. I'd prefer that this text was maybe all caps because it'll fill in the spacing a bit better. I want to change the leading, and the leading is the spacing between the lines. I'm also possibly going to mess with the tracking a bit as well. So here we are in the character panel. I'm going to go ahead and change my text size to bring it down a little bit. To kind of fill in the gaps a bit more. Sorry, my computer is being a little laggy right now. There, that's looking good. I want my leading. I'd like to decrease it a bit. But I'm going to go ahead and see if I can go ahead and make this all caps. Instead, to kind of fill that in. And then my leading's not looking so bad. I'm going to go ahead and my tracking is the spacing between the actual words and text themselves. I'm going to decrease this spacing a little bit. Actually, that did not help. Let's go back to 100. In Photoshop, this leading, it appears that in Photopea it can't go negative, but in Photoshop you can. So you can see I've filled in the text for the most part. I'm going to go back to my character and see if I can change this to fill it in a little bit more. I'm going to make it a more bold text to fill it in even more. And you can see too, as that text fills in, I have a little bit of a spacing issue down below by his chin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this text. I'm going to find that point in which it lets out, and then I'm going to paste it again to fill in. So there's my text. And hopefully you are able to kind of fill in your spacing even more than I did, make it a little bit more prominent and more bold than I have as well. But then what I'm going to do, now this is the key characteristic for this project. So I have my text layer. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on it. So again, I right clicked on the text layer. I'm going to rasterize it. So when I rasterize it, I've made it into a graphic. I've made it into a raster graphic versus the vector. So now I can no longer go in there and change the actual text itself. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit my control key and I'm going to click on the thumbnail. And when I do, it creates a selection around every word. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my image. I'm going to go to Edit, Copy. So I'm copying parts of the image using the text selection. Edit, Paste, and it'll paste an image that's in the shape of the selection of the text on top of that. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to hide the initial text layer, hide the actual image itself layer, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about right now, but right now it's on a white background. To make this work best, it usually works better on a black background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to go to Layer, New Fill Layer, Color Fill. I'm going to choose black. I'm going to hit OK. And there we are. There's my text portrait. So it's text, and it's of Danny's eulogy written by one of his closest friends. And that text makes up the image of him. Now, there's a couple things that you can do to even fine tune this. So I don't necessarily like all the text that I see up around here. I want to focus more on Danny. So what I can do is I can go to the layer 1, which is the actual image of the text that makes him up. And I can go in here and I can use my dodge and burn tool. So I can use my burn tool. Oops. Click and hold on the burn tool. And I can let's change the size of that brush so it's rather large. I'm going to make the hardness, bring that down. And I'm going to start going over those words, and I'm going to start darkening those areas. And it'll start darkening the words around him. Again, it's getting a little laggy, so it's not cooperating as much as I wanted it to. Oh, that's not what I wanted to happen. But you can go over that. You can also, if you wanted to, you can also use your brush tool, and you can change your opacity down to maybe like 20 or 15%. Change the size of your brush, the softness of your brush. Make sure that you have black on your brush, and start to darken those areas as well, so that Danny himself stands out a little bit more. But kind of fine tune it to where you want it. But here you go. There's your text portrait.